Swiss officials have said the blaze was likely a flashover or backdraft. Milad Haghani is an associate professor in urban risk and resilience at the University of Melbourne and joins us now. Milad Haghani, welcome. So describe for us in layman's terms what a flashover is.
Joe, flashover is a critical state when it comes to any indoor fire evacuation or any indoor fire rescue and suppression operation. Basically, when a fire starts in an enclosed space, there will be a gradual buildup of hot gas towards the ceiling. People in that space might not necessarily notice this buildup, and the temperature might be tenable for them, but the temperature near the ceiling would increase, and there will be a point where this hot gas reaches its critical temperature, which is around 600 degrees of Celsius. And this is what is called the ignition point of the gas. And when that happens, the gas basically explodes, and there will be radiation of heat towards any material in the room, and any content in the room will simultaneously and instantly catch on fire. So we go from a local fire basically to a room fully engulfed in fire. And this is basically a point where survival becomes impossible. And firefighters get extensive training to read the signals and signs and the precursors of flashover, but for ordinary civilians, it is really hard to identify this situation, and it is even late if an evacuee find themselves in this situation, because the time between the identification and the flashover state is just a few seconds, and people should avoid being in that state in the first place.
Yeah, so what have you made of some of the video that you've seen of the start of this fire in the ceiling of this Swiss bar and those subsequent images as well, and the nature of this blaze?
Well, first of all, based on the limited footage that is available, some aspects of fire safety code violation in a nightclub seems to be apparent. For example, the use of sparklers is something that is quite notable and is deemed unsafe. Any form of pyrotechnics used in nightclubs, in the past incidents in nightclub disasters, many of the cases have been due to the use of pyrotechnics, with sparklers being one form of them. The use of pyrotechnics, there seems to be foam padding in the ceiling. The development of fire shows some form of foam material present in the ceiling that would accelerate the time that it takes for the room to get to the flashover state. Basically, the time, it depends on the size of the space, the material that is present in that space, and nightclubs are prone to having a quick flashover and are full of material that would accelerate this time. And as a result, the use of any of such materials, such as sparklers, any form of flammable material, should be strictly banned, including candles or any form of pyrotechnics. But there seems to have been some of this material present in the way of New Year celebration in that nightclub.
Yeah, you've conducted research into nightclub fires around the world. How dangerous are nightclubs when it comes to fires?
Well, usually when a fire breaks in a nightclub, results are catastrophic. I've looked at the last deadly 24 nightclub fires in the world, and the average number of casualties in a nightclub is actually above 100. Wow. It is because of the fact that nightclubs are packed with people and usually offer very limited space for the quick evacuations of people. There's not much exit capacity for a quick evacuation. And at the same time, the material that is used in the form of furniture in a nightclub is highly flammable, including the foam used in the ceiling or the presence of an abundance of alcohol. That all accelerates the progression of a fire, and it shortens the time between the ignition of fire and the point where the room is entirely engulfed in fire, meaning the flashover state.
Yeah, so this has been a horrific incident in Switzerland. How would you describe Australian fire regulations for nightclubs?
Australian fire regulation is strict in nightclubs, and fortunately, we have had a good record of safety in our local nightclubs, but there is no room for complacency, as I mentioned, given the track records that we have seen overall in nightclubs around the world, and the fact that these incidents do happen with a certain regularity, and when they do happen, the results are quite catastrophic. It is always prudent to be vigilant and be strictly adherent to safety practice, especially a ban on the use of any form of pyrotechnics and anything that could ignite a fire in any nightclub. This should be observed with utmost strictness.
And so what's your best advice for people when it comes to if they're in some sort of club or business and noticing even an apparently small fire?
Look, something that is very apparent is the fact that we have footage of this fire from within the nightclub. And the person who is taking the footage seems to be stationary and not making their way towards the exit and basically not evacuating. And this is something that strictly is advised against. We do have an instinctive, tendency to film incidents these days, but we should also be aware that any second that we spend on filming these incidents as they develop means that we are losing those critical seconds that are important for survival. When we are in a bar, in a restaurant, or in a nightclub, and we see a little bit of flame and a fire, we probably tend to think that things are under control and nothing is going to happen, and we downplay the risk. And basically nobody wants to be the person who starts evacuating the first or look panicky. But it is always okay to react to these incidents calmly, make your way towards the exit. If the incident happens to be under control, you can always return to the venue. But there is no point in downplaying the risk, staying and collecting footage, knowing that at any moment the fire that seems to be progressing gradually could get to a critical state, and at that critical state, escape and survival might become very difficult.
And adequate exit points are critical as well.
Well, nightclubs do not have the best exit capacities, and any person going to a nightclub should be aware of the fact that they are basically in an area packed with people with very limited exit capacity. So when a sign of a danger, like a fire danger, is apparent, it is always prudent to act upon that early, knowing the fact that in a nightclub, usually there is not much escape capacity. Nightclubs are infamous for not having wide exit routes, and that is a typical feature of most of the nightclubs. It is good for people to be aware of that and do not downplay the risk and act on risk as swiftly as possible.
Okay, Milad Haghani, thanks so much for talking to us from Melbourne.